The 243 and the 6.5 Creedmoor, how do they stack up? What are the advantages and disadvantages to both? That is the cartridge comparison that we're going to do today. Welcome to the podcast, where we talk about guns, tactics, ballistics, the right way with God Almighty at the center. Biblical, Judeo-Christian values and real-world first-hand experience. Military, law enforcement, private security, contracting. Started hunting when I was a boy. Been a professional hunter and guide. Competition shooter. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and fingers for battle. Bio bullet points in the show notes. Okay, why are we going to compare these two cartridges? Well, because I think these are two of the best choices. I didn't say the two best, but two of the best choices that one might look at for a mild-mannered, low recoil, like less recoil than a 308, around that are great for deer hunting. You're not going to handicap yourself with some, government-regulated straight-wall cartridge. You're not going to do it with a PCC or a pistol caliber lever action or anything like that. These are, although more mild-mannered than a 308, they're full-powered rifle cartridges. They're quite a bit more powerful than a 30-30 or a 300 Blackout or some straight-wall abomination. These are modern, and by modern I mean like 1890s technology, right? Bottlenecked, high-velocity Spitzer cartridges. A lot of times thought of as good cartridges for beginning deer hunters or younger deer hunters or female deer hunters. Although I would argue these are some of the best deer cartridges, period. End of sentence. If you want to hunt deer with a 300 Win Mag, you certainly can do that, and many people do, but you don't need it. When we say hunting here in America, we hunt all kinds of things, but primarily we think of deer hunting. And these are both perfectly suitable cartridges for deer. Let's just get that out of the way. You can argue with that if you want. If you're the guy that thinks that you need a 300 Ultra Magnum to hunt deer, then whatever. But these are both perfectly suitable for deer, and many, many deer have been taken with these calibers. I myself, hunting and guiding, have taken a lot of animals. Deer, wolf, elk, with these calibers. They're perfectly suitable and good hunting calibers with mild manners and lower recoil. So let's do a little bit of comparison. Now, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to mention here is going to be from Midway USA. I'm not sponsored by Midway USA. They're a great company if I were to take sponsors, but I don't take sponsors because I don't want to be biased, like taking sponsors from gun and ammo companies and getting free stuff and telling you how great it is. But I did use Midway USA because they're a site I've been using a long time. So long that my password is my old badge number from L.A.P.D. That was a long time ago, guys. That's how long I've been using this company. In fact, when I do a background check, I'll often go to Midway USA because it stores all my old addresses when I have to do something for the feds because I'm a private security contractor. I'll often go in there because it's the easiest place to find all my old addresses because I've almost certainly ordered something from every place I've lived from Midway USA going back, well over a decade. Maybe almost 20 years at this point using that website and that company. So that's where I went to look at some of this data. That's the reason I say that. So that's to give credit where it's due. When I went to Midway USA, a good site, when I looked at rifle ammunition for 243, so this is ammo availability, 72 results, like different loads available, factory loads for 243. When I looked at the 6.5 Creedmoor, it was 113. Okay, so that's a decent amount for both. There is more for the 6.5 Creedmoor. Years ago, this would not have been the case. 243 is much older than 6.5 Creedmoor. The 6.5 Creedmoor has come on strong. It is, aside from the 5.56, which is not a full-powered rifle cartridge, I believe of the full-powered rifle cartridges, it's either beating or just behind or neck and neck with, depending on the year recently, with 308. It is either the most popular or certainly one of the most popular, full-powered rifle cartridges, the 6.5 Creedmoor. It has come on strong. And although both are very available, the 6.5 Creedmoor is more available. So there is that. That is a real thing to be aware of. Both of these are going to be available most places that you get ammo. So just be aware of that. They're both readily available calibers. It's not like we're talking about like a 7mm Remington or a 7mm, let's pick a fairly obscure one, a 7mm Winchester short mag. Well, it's a good caliber, but it's hard to find ammo for. These are both very available calibers, but the 6.5 Creedmoor does have more loads available. And this is one of the few, the 6.5 Creedmoor is one of the few cartridges that's come out in the past 20 years, 30 years that has really gotten a giant foothold in the market. So I would not be concerned about it going away as long as we have, modern supply chains. It's a very available cartridge. Okay, so looking at ballistics, you can cherry pick ballistics all day long. But, again, I have experience with both of these cartridges. They are very lightweight. Since they're both very popular, they have a fairly big expanse of grain weight for caliber from light, middle, and heavy. So I try to do my best to pick a load light, middle, and heavy. So we're looking at like a lightweight for each one, a middleweight for each one, and a heavyweight in caliber for each one. Okay, so that's going to bring us to the lightweight 243 is 55 grain at 3,800 feet per second. That is screaming high velocity. 55 grain at 3,800 feet per second. Screaming hot velocity. Muzzle energy, 1763. If we look at the 6.5 Creedmoor, 90 grains, so much heavier for the lightest factory load I could find, but 90 grains, still light for caliber, because, it doesn't seem like a big difference, but 243 is 6mm, and obviously 6.5 is 6.5 millimeter, half a millimeter. But when it goes to diameter and mathematics, you get a quite a bit heavier bullet in your lighter weights. So we're looking at 90 grains at 3,300. Quite a bit slower, still fast. 3,300 is fast for a 6.5 Creedmoor. And we're looking at 2176 per foot-pounds. And both of those loads are Nosler Armageddons. I wasn't able to keep them the same manufacturer for all of them, but for those two it was. And again, that's a 55 grain at 3,800 with the 243 and a 90 grain at 3,300 for the 6.5 Creedmoor. Now, for the middleweight, I love the 85, 87 grain bullets for the 243. I've taken deer and elk. I used to hand load. My favorite load for these was a Sierra Game King over Varget. A fantastic load. It is just a fantastic load. It works really well. I like that load. And I also have used a lot of middleweights for the 6.5 Creedmoor, because I'm not super worried about what's the highest, longest BC. I'm not worried about all that, shooting steel at super long range. That's like playing golf. It's a fun sport, but not super practical if I'm talking about ethical hunting. So I like the middleweights for both, actually. So I'm comparing my two favorite middleweight loads for these, at least currently, that I could find factory loads for. Obviously, I'm not going to do hand load stuff, but factory loads, fairly close to what I would load, 85 grain and a Federal Power Shock, 85 grain at 3,200 feet per second. So if we look at that, going back, that's fairly close in weight and muzzle velocity to the 90 grain 6.5 Creedmoor. But anyway, the middleweight here, 85 grains at 3,200 feet per second for 1933 foot-pounds. If we look at 125 grain, one of my favorite loads for this factory load is the Deer Season XP. Phenomenal load for deer-sized game. 125 grains at 2850. Again, quite a bit slower, but 2254 foot-pounds. Okay, now let's move up to heavyweight. I found factory loads for, and I have used this load as well. Factory load, heaviest one for caliber for the 6.5 Creedmoor is 156 grain. There are a couple loads I chose a Burger, 156 grain at 2680 feet per second. So that's a decent heavy round for caliber. That's a very long bullet. And if we look at the 243, it pretty much tops out at 100 grain if you're talking about factory twist rate, factory grains, factory loaded ammo. We're talking about 100 grains at 2690. And again, that's going to be 156 grains at 2680 feet per second. Okay, I know that was a lot of ballistic nerdery there. I'll come back to kind of an overview of both these calibers in a second. But I also wanted to look at, again, Midway USA. You go to Ammo Seek or something, your things may differ, but I was already on Midway. So if we look at 243 ammo, the cheapest I could find, which is a soft point, Cellar and Below, or Cellar and Below, however you want to pronounce it, $21.99 a box, so $1.10 per round. And the cheapest Cellar and Below, which just happened to be the same brand, 6.5 Creedmoor, was 94 cents. Makes sense, right? There's more ammo available, so it's going to be economy of scale, going to be a little bit cheaper. Not a lot. You're talking 94 cents versus $1.10 a round. Also, I would point out that the 243 load is a soft point, more of a hunting load, and the 6.5 Creedmoor is a full metal jacket, not a hunting load, right? So, but if you're just talking about shooting targets, you don't care. But a little bit cheaper, actually, for the 6.5 Creedmoor. So there is that. More available, slightly more affordable. Okay, so real quick. So I actually see some conflicting data on when the 243 came out, but let's say mid-50s. This is important because this is obviously pre-laser rangefinders. And if you wanted to shoot a little bit farther, then you wanted to crank up the speed. Now, the 6.5 Creedmoor came out in 2007. Didn't catch on right away. And the 243 was designed as a flat shooting, low recoil hunting cartridge. A good crossover for varmints and deer. And although it wasn't even the fastest at the time, it had good marketing, it had good twist rates, and it caught on as that kind of dual-purpose caliber as far as varmints and deer at longer ranges, deer, antelope, things like that. A good flat shooting cartridge. The 6.5 Creedmoor that came out in 2007, post-laser rangefinder, it was not designed to be flat shooting. A lot of people think because it's a good long-range cartridge, it's flat shooting. It is not. If you look at the numbers, it is not even close to as flat shooting as a 243 at reasonable ranges. What it is a 30 Thompson center, which is shorter than a 308 case neck down, so you can use longer, sleeker bullets. It doesn't have screaming high velocities, as we saw from the numbers. In fact, often less impressive than a 308, but it has longer, sleeker bullets. So when you get out to extreme ranges, I would say beyond 500 yards, it is more efficient. And you don't really care about the drop with laser rangefinders if you're shooting targets and steel targets, because you're generally dialing. And if you know the exact range, if it drops 17 inches or 25 inches, you don't really care because you're dialing and you know the range. And what is more important generally is the wind, because the wind call is often harder and more determining of whether you're going to get a hit or a miss than your range, because you know the exact range. It's almost impossible to know the exact wind call. So you want a very efficient bullet that bucks the wind better. Getting back to the real world, if you're not shooting still targets to stay still and you only have a limited amount of time, and you're likely going to be shooting practically standing, sitting, kneeling, prone, more traditional rifle craft. You may only have, a split second to a couple of seconds to get that shot off on your animal. In which case, you don't want to be sitting there with a fidget spinner for men with some giant obese scope and a tripod trying to fidget and figure out your dope and shoot laser ranges. You want to be able to see deer, put crosshairs behind the pocket of the front shoulder or wherever your preferred aiming method is, and pull the trigger and drop the deer. And the greater distance you can do that, the more effective you're going to be in the field at different ranges. So, max point blank range. I'm still a max point blank range hunter, and I would say max point blank range plus. Right? If it's a little bit farther, I can use hash marks, I can use holdover, and it's still very fast and very efficient. I have gone down the road of uber long range and turning dials and using all the laser rangefinders and getting dope and dialing dope. I don't like doing that. Not because I'm a spot and stalk and still hunter. This may or may not apply to you. Whatever method applies to you is probably going to be more indicative of which cartridge you choose. If you want to be the guy that's, got a giant fat rifle with a giant fat scope and a bipod and a tripod and you turn and dial and fidget, then you're going to be more the 6.5 Creedmoor guy a lot of times. If you're a max point blank range guy, you might gravitate more towards the 243 because it's going to win that max point blank range. Although, if you're an Eastern hunter, you probably don't care either way because you probably shoot you may have shot your entire life and hunted deer your entire life and shot every deer inside 150 yards, in which case, neither one of these is going to make a difference. Also, when I crunched the recoil numbers, it's not exact because I didn't have a charge weight because I was using factory loads and it doesn't give you the powder. And the powder also contributes. It's not just the projectile weight and the velocity, it's also the ejecta-mass, the total weight of the propellant. So I guessed at that, and I used the same 50 grains of powder. It's probably not correct. The 6.5 Creedmoor is a more efficient cartridge. They're both efficient, but the 6.5 Creedmoor is more efficient. So it's probably a little bit less powder on the 6.5 Creedmoor. Probably not enough to sway the numbers, but the 243 has less recoil. I don't think it would be enough to flip-flop it. If you're shooting it in the same weight rifle, 243 is going to have less recoil. But again, both of these are light recoiling cartridges, so they're both going to have less recoil than a 308 and a similarly weighted rifle. Another big consideration, are you a light, fast bullet guy or a heavy, slower bullet guy? That is a big difference in these two. Although they're both like modern high-velocity cartridges, as we talked about, you get that light for caliber bullet in the 243, and you're talking 3,800 feet a second. That's just below $4,000, 4,000 feet per second. 3,800 feet per second is screaming fast. Nothing that the 6.5 Creedmoor does is going to come close to that. But the 6.5 Creedmoor, you can get 150 plus grain bullets. Nothing in the 243 comes even close to that. You're topping out at 100 grains. Now again, both of these are perfectly adequate and perfectly good for taking deer-sized game. It's just kind of what formula do you want? Do you want lightweight, high velocity, or do you want heavier weight, moderate velocity? There's more than one way to skin that cat, and both of these will skin that cat handily. In fact, I will say that your bullet selection, I don't mean weight, I mean the construction of your bullet, is way more important in either one of these calibers than the difference between the caliber. Meaning if you do a really poor choice on your bullet selection, you're going to be worse off than you would with either caliber. Or if you do a really good bullet selection in either caliber, you'll be better than you would be with a bad bullet in either caliber. The bullet construction, the bullet design for the game that you're hunting, the distances that you're hunting, is more important than either one of these calibers. They're both good calibers. The bullet choice and bullet construction is often way overlooked. People nerd out about calibers and how sub-MOA they can get their sub-MOA group. But bullet construction, the bullet is the thing that does the damage when it gets to the target. If you're talking about shooting steel targets or paper, who cares, right? But if you're talking about a living creature, you should put some time and effort into the construction of that bullet. Bullet construction for both of these is going to be more important than whichever caliber you choose. Okay, a couple of other things that I want to touch on. If we go to 6.5 Creedmoor for, if this is right, this is quite a big difference if we talk about rifles. What kind of rifle do you like? What kind of rifle are you into? If you're going to buy new off the shelf, again, these are both widely available, but the 6.5 Creedmoor, when I looked again on Midway USA, 173 results for rifles chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor. 243, 77 results. There's a lot more in 6.5 Creedmoor for new rifles than 243. Okay, so new rifle, there's going to be a lot more choices in the 6.5 Creedmoor. If you're looking at older rifles, you like classic rifles. Obviously, if you're going to go with something like a pre-64 Winchester Model 70, your only option is going to be 243 out of these two calibers because it was the only one that existed then. The 6.5 Creedmoor that came out in 2007, and it wasn't really even popular. When it came out, it didn't just take off like a rocket ship. It was a gradual increase in numbers, and it really got big around the 20 teens. That was when it really started hitting the market in any kind of quantity. So you can find used rifles, but you're going to have a lot more longevity in finding, if you're into the classic blued steel, walnut, classic rifles of yesteryear, you're going to obviously find a lot more. You're not going to find any unless somebody rechambered one, which kind of destroys the nostalgia collector value of it. But all your older rifles, pre-2007, and mostly, pre-20 teens, all those are going to be, your choice is going to be the 243. And obviously, if you gravitate more towards the latest and greatest, I want the hottest rifle with all the adjustable stock fidget spinners, with a Arca rail and all this other stuff, then your choice is going to be the 6.5 Creedmoor. So for new rifles, again, new technology rifles, you're going to have a lot more options than 6.5 Creedmoor. For the classic rifles, obviously 243. So it just depends on which one you want there. Also, let's talk about reloading. I reload. I would encourage you to reload. Most people don't. Most people don't hunt. Most people that hunt don't reload, I think. I don't know what the numbers are, but something like, if the numbers and the stats are correct, and most stats aren't, but if it's even roughly correct, something like 5% of the U.S. population hunts. And that's sad. And that's hunts, period. That could be bird hunting, squirrel hunting, deer hunting, but 5%. And a lot of those guys don't reload. It's a small fraction of the population that reloads. However, I should touch on it. If you do reload, the 6.5 Creedmoor comes with a fast twist rate. I think it's 1-in-8. I could be wrong about that, whatever the standard is. Now, it's going to do better with your longer, sleeker bullets. That's what it was designed for, post-rangefinder, where long, sleek bullets kind of win the game for that. However, if you are going to get a custom rifle and hand load, when you put a fast twist on a 243 and load it with longer bullets, you can get, much longer, sleeker bullets in 6mm. You'd be surprised. It hangs in there really, really well at longer ranges, again, with a custom barrel and custom loads. So that's just something to think about. Guys, these are both good calibers. I like both. I hunt with both. Here's where it kind of is nice to have these calibers, and I'm not the uber long-range hunter guy. I'm not. I'm a spot and stalk and still hunter. I like to get in close. Not that I can't shoot long range. I'm a state rifle champion a few times over. I've gotten to the long range stuff and then got out of it. I don't think it's ethical because animals are not steel targets. Animals move. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I don't care if you have a .0001 MOA gun, which probably doesn't exist, but it shoots perfectly. And you are a supercomputer. You can read the wind perfectly, which even the best F-class shooters can't read the wind perfectly. But let's say you can. All the things are perfect. Your rest is rock solid. That animal is on the side of a hill where you have all day to range him and get your setup and your tripods. You're not even part of the equation, right? You have a 18-pound rifle and a half-a-pound trigger, so you're not even going to pull the rifle off target at all. Everything is perfect. Well, I don't know if you spent much time around deer or elk, but they move. right? They're moving, living creatures, and they spend the majority of their waking hours eating, which means they typically walk step after step after step. So even if you do everything perfectly out past, let's say, 450 yards, if you do everything perfect and you pull that trigger, that animal takes one step or two steps in that time of flight of that bullet for either one of these calibers, a second, second and a half, multiple seconds, that animal can go a long way. Think about if I was shooting at you, or even if I wasn't shooting, you were just walking. How much do you move in 2 seconds? Wherever that bullet is, that animal may not be there when the bullet gets there. So I don't think it's ethical to shoot animals at long range. In a pure survival situation where I'm starving, yeah, I'll do what I got to do. But in just general, where I can just hunt another day, I don't think it's ethical. So I'm not that long range hunter guy. If you want to shoot steel at long range, I consider that like playing golf. Have fun. It's a fun sport. So I'm not even talking about that. Like, take that off the table. These are both really good rounds for deer, period. Not just for, 75-pound shooters that are anorexic with anemia, or women or children. They're great deer calibers, period. Especially when you get into the lighter weight rifles. I like to hike a lot. I live, greater Yellowstone area, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, Utah. Like, I love big open country. I like hiking. I like, spending days in the bush discovering new country. Well, in a lightweight handy rifle, you're talking like 6 pounds, 5 pounds. One of my rifles is 4 pounds. 4 pounds naked, but like 4 pounds. When you get into really lightweight rifles, even something like a 30-06 and a 4-pound rifle, it's not real pleasant to shoot and practice with a lot. These offer, in a very lightweight rifle, an advantage in that they're light and handy. One of the reasons that I've shot so many animals with a 243 is back in the day when I didn't have as much money as I'm blessed to have now, I just went to Walmart and bought a youth model 700. It's not even a great rifle. It's not super accurate. It's not super reliable. I've killed all kinds of stuff with that rifle because it's light and handy. I don't mind carrying it all day as opposed to something that's bigger and heavier. That's maybe better ballistically, but, again, I like to spot and stalk and still hunt. So the rifle being ready in my hands is way more likely to get me an animal than a big heavy rifle, better ballistically, that I'm not as good at shooting at quickly, getting snapshots, standing, on my 2 legs, shooting a deer on its 4 legs that may be moving. Like, a light handy rifle is better for that. So I like these calibers for that. And again, I own both. And I own lightweight rifles in both, and they're great. I have heavier rifles and bigger calibers, but these are fantastic for a lighter weight rifle. That's why I think they're some of the best hunting rifle calibers, period. And that ladder spiel there, that's my opinion. You do what you want. If you're hunting out of a deer stand inside of 200 yards, which is the vast majority of deer hunters in America, because sadly you guys live east of the Mississippi, my condolences. It doesn't really matter if your rifle weighs 7 or 8 pounds because you're walking, a quarter mile or less and sitting in a tree stand. So, again, that's me. It may not apply to you. Take what applies. These are both very good calibers. So your big takeaways are you a light, fast bullet guy? Are you a heavier, moderate velocity bullet guy? Because these are both great calibers. With that, thank you for listening, guys. Your tactical tip of the day, if you're getting into hunting on knives, let's get away from the caliber stuff. On knives, a lot of people, a lot of guys that are into guns and hunting, they're also into knives. And you might think that, I want a reason to have a really big, giant knife. However, I found it doesn't matter what it is. Deer, elk, bear, sheep. There's uses for big knives, but generally not processing game. Processing game, really the sweet spot, if you're going to use one knife to do everything, then a 3 to 5 inch blade is great. Anything more than that, it's kind of more unwieldy and harder to use and harder to get good cuts and stuff with than that 3 to 5 inch range. A good general purpose sharp 3 to 5 inch knife. I prefer fixed blades, but folders are fine. That's any game animal on the planet you can process with that size knife. And again, when you get bigger, although you might think it's cool and you want to be like Rambo, right? You could certainly skin a deer with a machete if you have to, but if you go to that extreme, obviously it's going to be less convenient and less handy and make your job harder with that bigger blade. Again, that 3 to 5 inch range. So if you're just looking for a good all-around hunting knife for processing game, that 3 to 5 inch range is kind of that sweet spot I've found over the years. Save that giant fixed blade knife for like when the Cubans and the Russians are, paratrooping out of the skies at high schools. You probably get the reference. I appreciate you guys. Let's do a tactical verse of the day. You shall not have in your bag differing weights, a heavy and a light. You shall not have in your house differing measures, a large and a small. You shall have a perfect and a just weight and a perfect and a just measure. Hey guys, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.